It's the Locked On Flyers podcast with a bonus episode taking a look at the Travis Konecny contract extension.
Okie doke.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We are at Locked On Flyers on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter as well. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. You can find us on YouTube or on the Sirius XM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, we mentioned on today's show specifically about surprises that could come up and change our recording schedule. This was certainly one of them. Now, the Travis Konecny contract extension has been in the works for a while. So the fact that it happened is not a surprise. It's the timing of it that was a surprise for us. But 8 years, $70 million, $8.75 million per year. It does have a no move clause for the first 6 years of the 8 years, and then a limited no trade for the last two for this contract. That's pretty typical for these 8-year deals, right?
5. 6 seems one too many. 5 is what I usually see.
So it is the biggest contract in Flyers history, so they say.
Yeah. So, couple things. First one is when you listen to the press conference and his wanting to stay here as much as he did, that's where I would have traded. If I already lost the battle on the term but won the battle on the AAV, I kind of wanted to win the battle on the no move, and I would have only done it for 5. The fact that they did it for 6 hurts a little because, again, if you start looking at other players, like if you look at a Brendan Gallagher or just other players that rely on speed, there's always a point when that speed goes, how are they going to play? So that's the reason I say that. Now, I looked at his draft year, and in 2015, right now he's 8th most in points. What's interesting is behind him is Brock Besser, who's probably going to get a little more money. He's played fewer games, but he only has 18 fewer points, 1 more goal. Timo Meier is right behind that, and he's basically the same deal.
Exactly.
But they're different
pretty
players.
much.
But they're different players. And I didn't like the Timo Meier deal either, to be honest. So I think Konecny will give them a little more bang for the buck than Meier did. But my whole thing is I would have paid him 9.2, 9.5 for 5 years. I never would have wanted to have this go for 8, but it is, so that's what it is.
Yeah, interestingly, we talked about this on May 28th was the last time we talked about this. I watched our segment to get the actual facts here, and the chatter had been about 10 million at the time, right? You said you didn't want to go above 8.5 million at that time in a 4-year term. Ideally, you'd compromise it to 5.
Right.
I said a 6-year deal would be fine because that would get him to age 34. Then he would roll over to a 35 and over contract at that time. And I talked about how Travis Konecny was worth more now than Sean Couturier was at the time of signing. He's got a 7.75. Now, I understand the cap is different. So even given that, I netted out at 8 to 8.5 for 6 years. So we're pretty close to what he got in terms of the value. It's just the term. And I think that I think what we're seeing here is this is pretty much the price you pay right now is that you got to give these guys the term, and there's almost no way around it.
Giving him the term is the only way to keep the AAV to what that number was. That's why future Russ was willing to even give a little more, realizing that it wasn't going to stick with that number for the short amount of years. But the problem is also trying to match up the contracts for when they're actually going to be a true Stanley Cup contender. Because Travis can
Yeah.
say he hopes they're a playoff team, and that's great. But we know it's not exactly the whole team back. We know the differences. We've talked about them. You can go look on a different show. But maybe in 2 years that changes, and that's where it's like, okay, he's still a part of the team. I get it, but for how many more? And so, like, you don't know. By the time they're knocking on the door for a cup, he might be on the downslide. And that's the part that we talked about even before that last show when we talked heavy
Right.
about his contract, that sometimes it's hard to match these things up. By the time the Flyers are a cup team, Sean Couturier may be, long gone, bought out. It could be anything like that too. Like, these are all possibilities. And that's why this is a little bit dangerous because, honestly, and this is just to be fair to Chuck Fletcher, I've had people text me, this is like a Chuck Fletcher deal. Well, Chuck Fletcher is a GM like everybody else is a GM in this league, and a lot of them end up making the same decisions. We have to admit to that.
Sometimes, and I think that, again, given the way the cap has been jumping recently, I think these guys are just trying to lock in as high as they can get for as long as they can get,
Right.
and are not willing to compromise as much because they do anticipate the cap going up. And so right now, this is like 9 point something percent of the Flyers cap. That percentage is going to go down presumably
Sure.
as the cap increases, and that's kind of, I would say, what the agent's negotiating base is focused on here, is that, yeah, it's going to seem like a lot right now, but you're still only paying him the 5.5 for the next year, and then the cap will go up even more, the percentage will go down, so everything's sunshine and roses here. You don't have to worry about your cap, right?
Right. Well, they're going to, though. And honestly,
Right. I'm saying that's
I
the
know the
agent
agent's gonna say,
speaking.
I knew you were being the agent, but they're going
Yeah.
to. And someone like Joel Farabee now could be in danger of being dealt, because they're going to look for some other cap relief somewhere else now that they've staked their claim on Travis. So that's just the nature of the game too. And so I think it'll be Farabee. It could be somebody else. It could be Risto going on long term, but we don't know yet because he's presumably healthy and probably going to play this year. So something's going to happen at some point to alleviate what this will be next year, even with the cap going
Yeah.
up, because they have other things. And the here's the weird thing. Okay, let's just say, for argument's sake, next year they are a true cup contender. Well, then they're definitely going to have to get their cap straight, because it's not going to be exactly straight, or they may come up short just trying to, get to
Right.
that point. I don't think they'll be in that position, but if they were, that's where the matching up the cap with it's kind of hard, because all of this is coming early. Mitchkov came early. This is coming now. So that's the different part of that. That's what it makes it more complicated now than it was last year.
Yeah, and this is what Danny Briere would say is a good problem to have, but it is a problem nonetheless. And I think that it's going to be a really delicate balance here. And like
Yeah.
you said, there's going to be some sacrifices and some guys that maybe we didn't want to lose that we're going to end up losing because of this contract. But will it be worth it in the end? I think it could. I think it's just we don't know yet, and we don't
Right.
know when the future prospects for the Flyers and whoever we draft next year, when they're going to peak and when all these contracts are going to come into focus
Right.
in supposedly the peak of this rebuild to get to a Stanley Cup. I I think it could work. It just may not too, and that remains to be seen.
I mean, again, just presuming that Mitchkov takes a similar approach to Tarasenko, or even a little better,
Mhm.
by year three, he's going to be looking for more money.
Yep.
And he's not going to accept a bridge deal. Like, they're not going to bridge him. So he's going to
Right.
get a real salary. So that's the other part of this that is coming, besides the other prospects. The other prospects, none of them will make as much as Mitchkov, but that's the next big salary from somebody of your own. That's when it's going to come.
Right. And so this contract goes until Travis Konecny is 36 years old. And so he's going to be up there at that time. And that's when all of this could be difficult. And we could be looking at, a temporary peak and then difficult to maintain
Yeah,
at that point. So that could be, how it plays out as
it
well.
could.
But again, that remains to be seen. I think, obviously one of the more fun aspects of this is a guy the Flyers drafted, and he is going to be a Flyer for his whole career. And nowadays, I think, presumably anyway, unless there's some sort of deal at the end of this extension, but I think that it's rare in sports, and I think it's really
It is.
great to have a guy
Yeah,
like
I
Travis
mean,
Konecny around for that long.
on that side of it, fans love it. So there's no question it's a rarity, and if you could do it, it's terrific. I am going to make a prediction. By the time this Travis connected contract kicks in, the Flyers will have a new sponsor on the side of their building. It won't
They
be
will.
Wells Fargo anymore.
Well, we know that it won't be Wells Fargo anymore. It just remains to be seen
What will it be?
what will it be? Look, I mean, Travis Sanheim is breaking contract news now,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
who
yeah,
knows what could happen.
yeah.
That was actually really
That was
funny
funny.
and really well played. I like Travis Sanheim is on the Travis news beat
Yeah.
these days.
No, that's good.
And I think that was a really clever way to announce this contract. But yeah, I think it is an interesting deal and to be continued in terms of how this affects the cap. But I personally am really excited to have him back on the team. I think he's obviously an integral part of the core
Yeah, no
of this
question.
team. And I'm glad to have him around. We'll see what the long term consequences are when we reconvene on this in 15 years, but that's how these things go. That will do it for this little bonus episode, and we will be back presumably on Monday with our new nemesis of the week, as well as a new weekly poll. Maybe it'll be about this contract. Who knows?
Maybe.
Stay tuned for that.
I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. And now we're in full swing for summer sports like baseball. We absolutely miss hockey, but FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. FanDuel has odds for Major League Baseball, the Paris games with over-unders on medal counts by country, soccer, which I told you got to watch the soccer, and so much more. So head over to fanduel.com/locked on and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
Have a great day, everyone.